Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is the singer from one of the most popular bands here in Germany in recent years. The name of the band is Silbermond, that's Silver Moon in English. The name of the singer is Stefanie Kloß, and here she is, right here with us in the studio. Thank you for joining us on Talking Germany today.
Yeah, hello.
Great to have you here. Now, Silbermond have been in the business for over a decade now. All of their albums have been big sellers, and they've just released their fourth, which is called Himmel auf, When the Heavens Open Up in English, more or less. Now, Silbermond aren't just a pop band, they live in the real world, and I'm sure it's going to be interesting to hear what Stefanie has to say about the following topics. Cuddle rock. Silbermond specialise in ballads, but when they want, they can also pump it up and rock the house. Meet the Sorbs. Find out about a small ethnic group of around 60,000 who live in the region that is home to our studio guest. They have a proud culture and their own language. And Club Crisis. Berlin is famous for its clubbing scene, but the people who run the clubs say they're being forced to leave downtown districts. Stefanie, welcome once again. Now, Silbermond are a very big band in Germany. That's great, yeah? Congratulations on that, yeah?
Thanks.
But outside Germany, less well known, when you meet people outside Germany and you say, hey, I'm the singer in a band, what do you tell them about the band?
I
think I would tell them that we're a small band from Germany.
Eine kleine Band aus Deutschland sind. Die,
you're very modest, Stefanie.
I'm not sure. It's hard to say. In the end, though, we're just people who like to make music together, for whom making music is a lot of fun. We're lucky that people have liked our work over the last few years.
Sehr gemocht haben und mögen.
As I say, very, very modest. OK, the key fact there was that there are four of you. When did you get together and how did you get together?
Wir haben uns kennengelernt vor
We met about 13 years ago in our hometown of Bautzen. And we recently realized that we've known each other for about half of our lives. We were really young, about 14 or 15, when we started playing together in a band. Since then, we've been friends. And we've had a lot of fun together.
Sounds great, yeah? It's extremely unusual that a band of four stay together for this amount of time. How do you explain it?
It's really hard to describe the energy that we have when we're together, to describe why things work so well with us. I think we're four people who simply like each other very much, who just click. We're on the same wavelength. And we've enjoyed being together since the beginning. We couldn't imagine seeing the band just as a job, where everyone goes their separate way at the end of the day. We've just been really close since the beginning. And our band developed out of this closeness.
And
what about you? When was the first time that you thought, I'm going to be a singer? First time that you thought you did that, you know, young girls, young boys do, playing around thinking, I've got a microphone in my hand?
It's hard to say with singing. Thomas and Johannes could always say, yes, we began to learn to play the guitar in the first grade at music school. But in my case, I think I was around 12 or 13 years old. I was an impatient child, and my parents let me try everything I wanted. But I quickly lost interest in anything that needed a lot of effort. For instance, learning to play an instrument wasn't me, because I would have to put in a lot of effort to sit down and really learn how to play. With singing, I was just able to start singing and it worked. I got the impression I didn't have to do very much. But when I look back now, 14 years later, I realize there's a lot more to it. But when you're 13, you don't have any idea about what's involved, and it's just a lot of fun. In my town, there was a choir project, which I joined. And since then, I've never stopped singing.
The first thing we must talk about is the language I'm speaking, English. Yeah. You started out as a cover band. You started out doing English lyrics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why was that initially? Why did you do that? You're Germans.
I can't really say how it all started. A lot of people have asked us about this. At the time, around 1998-99, there was a lot of English language music on the radio. As teenagers, we thought, English is cool, we need to do this.
Und das müssen wir jetzt machen.
The language of rock and pop.
Richtig, sozusagen.
Yes, but it took a while. Just playing covers of English songs wasn't a problem because we'd learned English in school. But when we started to write our own songs in English, we quickly realized there's a huge difference between learning English in school and writing good lyrics in English. So at some point we were really unhappy with it. I often brought my English lyrics to my English teacher and asked her to correct them, to check the grammar. But then I thought, this really isn't good. And then our percussionist Andreas came up with a text in German and we tried it and realized that it felt right.
There are a lot of people in the English-speaking world who say precisely that. They say English is the language of rock and pop. And sometimes it is said that German is not a good language for writing lyrics and poetry. It's more a language for science or something like that, or philosophy. It's sort of a bit of heavy and hard. Is it true?
Sicher ist die deutsche Sprache manchmal.
Yes, German is sometimes very direct and stiff. I think the key is the way it's packaged, also musically. And I think there are a lot of great artists who've shown that German lyrics can be quite wonderful. German can be humorous, it can be serious, and it can be romantic. I think what's most important is not being afraid of using German. We always tried, especially with this fourth album, not to be afraid of our own words. Because sometimes you think, I can't say that, or this sounds weird in German. I think you just have to ignore that and go with your gut feeling.
Ich glaube, das muss man einfach ablegen und einfach nach seinem Bauchgefühl einfach machen.
Mm-hmm. There was a time about, 20, 30 years ago where, especially for sort of pop bands like yours, most would sing in the English language. And then there's been slowly but surely, there has been a change, a bit of a revolution. Do you feel as though you were part of a sort of a movement when you chose the German language? Because there were other bands who were choosing the language at the same time.
Ja, also als wir angefangen haben oder als wir die Möglichkeit hatten, die erste Platte
When we released our first record, there were a lot of bands around, like Wir sind Helden or Juli, whose structure was similar to ours and who were writing German lyrics. We were always referred to as the new German wave.
Ja, wo wir bezeichnet wurden als die neue deutsche Welle. Ich muss sagen, wir selber...
The new German wave. Yeah?
Genau, und wenn man da selber gerade so drin steckt und als das...
And when you're right in the middle of this and people are labeling you this way, you can't look at it objectively. When I look back over the last 10 years, I have to say things have changed a lot. Over the last few years, a lot of good German artists have come up. Many of them are singer-songwriters.
It's normal.
Ja, jetzt mittlerweile ist es ein bisschen normaler geworden.
You can say, I'm going to be a German singer-songwriter, that's that.
Ja, und da muss ich sagen...
Yeah, that's how things have changed. This probably has to do with radio ratings back then. Radio stations said, no, we're going to play German music. And many just went ahead and played more German music.
Einfach auch mehr deutsche Musik vielleicht gespielt haben.
I think that there was always good German music, but now there are more opportunities for it to be heard.
Dass sie nur jetzt mehr Möglichkeiten hat, sich zu zeigen irgendwie.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about songwriting, and we'll talk a little bit about your studio a little bit later, and studio music specifically. What about touring? How important is touring for the band?
Also wir stehen ja unglaublich gerne
live. We love being on stage. If we were asked what we liked more, being in the studio or being on the road, we'd definitely say we'd rather be playing live. But you need to create new songs as well. So that's why you also need studio time. And it's fun in its own way. But when we started out, when we were 13, 14 or 15, the technology wasn't advanced enough to record songs easily. Back then, you had to prove yourself in live performances. And we used to play in the tiniest bars in Bautzen, at village festivals and street fairs. We even played at a place where kids were learning to ride bicycles. We played anywhere we could. And that's why we still believe that playing live is the best way to connect with our fans.
kann.
Okay. And one of the, in the very near future, you're going to be playing in places, correct me if it's not right, you're going to be in Amsterdam, Brussels, Paris, London. That's a big step for you. It's exciting. How are you preparing for that?
Eigentlich bereiten wir uns gar nicht großartig
Actually, we don't prepare that much.
You're going to do what you do.
Ja, und wir fahren auch so hin, wie
Yeah,
wir
we
sind.
just do it as we are. We don't modify the lyrics. We just go with our German music. This has something to do with the fact that some of our fans have written to us over the past few years about their year abroad in London, for instance, or that they lived in Paris for a while, and they asked us why we don't come to them. They told us there are a lot of people here who like German music. And then we finally decided that we would tour outside Germany after the album was finished. And I'm going to try to get closer to the language. I can probably do it with English, but probably not as well as if I were able to speak to you in proper English. It would be a little harder in French. That's probably the biggest challenge. But if you give anything some effort, you can somehow make it work. And I think that music connects.
Music is a universal language. It's not a cliche, it's true.
Yeah, it'll work.
Let's do a little bit of translation here, Stefanie. Your latest single is called?
The one that dates back the longest? The oldest one?
Well, the big single from your latest album, yeah?
Himmel auf.
Himmel auf, yeah. I tried to translate the title into English. It's actually not as easy as you think. I came up with When the Heavens Open Up.
Yeah.
You've made a very unusual video for it. I think it's I was really taken by the video. I like it very, very much. We're going to listen to a little bit of an extract now, first of all, and we'll talk about it in just a second.
Man kann ja nur glücklich sein, wenn man einmal unglücklich gewesen ist.
Wenn meine Tochter morgens aufwacht.
Wie in meiner Familie zusammen sein kann.
Ein Enkelkind.
Den besten Freund zu haben.
Wenn mein Herz lacht.
Eine schöne Hochzeit. Eine Freundin.
Sechs richtig im Lotto.
Geld.
Dass ich noch lebe. Wenn ich mit meinen Freunden unterwegs bin.
An so einem Tag wie heute hier stehen zu können.
Dass ich meinen Führerschein erhalten habe.
Du bist für alle.
Man hat nur dieses eine Leben. Und da muss man das Beste draus machen.
Ja, Glück ist einfach zu leben.
Glück ist Leben.
I really like that video. I mean, there are two things that are very unusual about it, yeah? One is that the music, the actual track we're talking about, Himmel auf, is only in the background.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that you, the members of the band, including you, the singer, yeah, you don't turn up in the video until right at the end of the video.
Richtig.
Yeah? Whose idea was all that?
Wir arbeiten immer, wenn wir Videos machen, sehr, sehr nah mit den
When we make videos, we work closely with our director, in this case Daniel Lewowski, who shot all the videos for our last album. We have a close and personal relationship with him. The five of us sat down together, and the first question we asked ourselves was, what's going on in Himmel auf? It deals with this heaven-opening moment, with this happiness that everyone wants to find, that everyone is waiting for. And then the five of us sitting around the table realized that we all had different definitions of happiness. So then it became important to us to ask a lot of people what they considered happiness to be, and to narrow it down to just one term. And then it became clear that people need room to give their answers. We just needed to turn off the music, put the song aside, and let people rewrite the song with their own words.
Okie, you've won me over. I'm absolutely convinced. Great video. But you go along to the record company and say, hey guys, we've got a really good idea. We're going to do a music video, but you're not going to hear much of the music. Yeah.
It certainly was daring, and it was also a risk. Mostly because over the last few years, people have regarded music videos as a song with some beautiful pictures. We're lucky that we now have our own record label and work with Sony as our partner. Over the last few years, we've always been able to do what seemed to make sense to us and what seemed to follow our main theme. That's why we did it.
Immer das gemacht haben, wo wir gesagt haben, da sehen wir den roten Faden und da sehen wir Sinn drin.
You've got some independence there.
Ja, und
yes, that's why they let us do it.
Jahre hinweg. Und deswegen haben die uns machen lassen.
But you're not independent of your fans. Some of your fans were not happy about it, were they?
Ja, es gab sicher einige, die ein bisschen verwundert waren.
There were definitely some people who were a little bit surprised by the video. They said, we want to hear the song. And what about the song? And we want to see the band. But many have also said, I've watched the video several times, I think it's really good and emotional. Maybe this is a new way to make a music video. I think it's also a good way. Maybe you have to let new things sink in first, before you can say whether you think they're good.
Anyway, great stuff. You said when you were having the discussion, yeah, the five of you were in the room and you had 5 different definitions of happiness. What was your definition of happiness?
Meine Definition für Glück ist
My definition of happiness is getting up in the morning and saying, I'm very happy and I want to do what I'm doing right now, and not, I have to do it. And the 4 of us as a band agree that if we're together in a room or are on stage and think, what are we doing here? Then we should consider whether we should continue. Fortunately, we're not there yet.
Aber so weit ist es zum Glück nicht.
I suppose when you ask somebody what's the definition of happiness, then people normally don't say money, yeah. But you have to earn a living, and there's a crisis in the music industry at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does the crisis define itself for you? We've had the definition of happiness. Let's have the definition of the crisis in the music industry.
Of course, we're aware of the changes in the music industry, how music is being consumed. Technology is rapidly developing. I don't think you should demonize everything that's new. You should rather be aware of what's new and ask, how can we make the best use of it, and what's positive about it? On the one hand, I think it's very good that people can consume music as they like. There are people who still have a record player at home and still purchase vinyl records. There are still people who like CDs and still want to hold something in their hands.
Eine Vinylplatte. Es gibt Leute, die mögen CDs und mögen es, wenn sie das in der Hand haben.
This all sounds very good and fine and very open-minded and liberal and everything, but you're saying everybody should sort of, have access to music in their own way. But if I now say to, a friend of mine, yeah, Silbermond have got a really nice record out, can you burn me a copy?
Then he says, yes, he can do it.
Yeah. Is that good or bad?
As a band, one that has very close contact with young bands and invests in young bands, we would say people need to support young bands, and you can't do this by illegally downloading their songs or simply burning CDs and giving them to your friends. A band can't make a living or a CD that way. But if you want to have good music, then you have to support it to some degree. That's my unequivocal position and a very clear statement.
Meine ganz klare Einstellung und ein ganz klares Statement.
So the bottom line is, if you want music, pay for it.
Wenn du Kultur möchtest,
if you want culture, if you want to have good movies or read good magazines, then of course these need to be produced, and that costs money.
Und ja, das kostet natürlich auch Geld.
Stefanie, I said at the beginning of the show that you are a band who try to live in the real world, and I think it's fair to say to use an old-fashioned word, you really care about the world you live in, and you've been involved in all sorts of cultural projects, including one which is a women's school in Cameroon.
Richtig, genau.
Just before we have a look at some photos of this and you tell me a little bit more, I was very intrigued by the fact that it's not a girls' school but a women's school. Yeah?
Yeah. Also wir haben gemerkt, die letzten Jahre.
Yes, many people have asked us to support good projects in recent years. We realized that if we did everything, we'd be doing it all half-heartedly. So we decided to find a few projects and support them 100%. Through Bread for the World, we came across this school for women in Cameroon. Cameroon is a country where women don't know the word emancipation. It's really a very male-dominated world there.
We can see there. We can see. We've seen various shots of you and Thomas down there.
Genau, da waren wir beide da und
yes, when Thomas, our guitarist, and I were there, it was unusual for them that a young man and a woman could be equal. And we succeeded, as I said, in building a school there with the help of our fans and many, many donations. We went there to open the school, and the mayor was also there. And, well, let me put it this way. The school is not wanted, but it's tolerated.
Aber sie wird geduldet.
What does that mean? Why? Yeah? The local authorities are not too happy about the school being there.
Richtig, weil
Right.
es ist, in diesem Land so,
In that country, women are taken from their families when they're 13 or 14, are married off, and are forced to have children. Then there's the huge problem of HIV/AIDS. Many men still believe that if they're sick or infected, they can be healed by sleeping with a virgin. And we talk to many people about it there. Unfortunately, this is the reality. And then you're standing there, you're at this opening ceremony, and the mayor shows up with his entourage consisting entirely of men. And then we were given the opportunity to talk.
Ich habe gesagt,
tough moment, difficult.
Ja, und ich stehe da vor allen Männern und ich habe.
And I'm standing there in front of all these men, and I ask the women from the school, if I say that in Germany equal rights and emancipation go without saying, what would happen to me? Would they all leave? What would happen? And the women said, no, feel free to say it. That was a really bizarre moment. All of the women applauded, and the mayor just sat there and said nothing. And this is why I said that the school is tolerated but not liked, because it helps make the women more independent. They can eventually earn their own money. They won't be reliant on men anymore, and the people there don't like this.
Okay. Let's just have... I've got a quote from you. You said, the project in Cameroon gave me a lot of strength for other projects that followed. You've been involved in other projects. Let's just have a look at a few more shots. I think we've got some photos of a concert in your hometown of Bautzen, where you were the concert designed to collect funding for your projects. Just tell us a little bit about what we can see here then, Stefanie.
That's
a very small concert we've been hosting for 10 years. It takes place near Bautzen, our hometown, in a very small village called Schmochtitz. We raise funds for children and students in Lithuania and Guatemala. The money we raise here is used, for example, to give scholarships to Mayan people so they can study. And now in our 10th year, we were very lucky. This was a great opportunity to meet a couple of Mayans who told us how much their lives had changed because of the scholarship. They're extremely grateful, and it has enriched their lives so much to be able to study, to get an education. And it's great to see that over the last 10 years of this fundraising concert, which only 500 people can attend, the tickets sell out in just 4 minutes. Every year we raise unbelievable amounts of money, from young fans as well, who say they want to do good. I think this is a great thing to witness, to see how young people begin to understand that it's not important how much one gives, but that such a small donation can really have a big impact.
Sondern dass es nur darauf ankommt, dass auch eine kleine Summe eben viel bewirken kann.
Great stuff. OK, we've talked about... I mean, that concert took place in Bautzen. Bautzen is Stefanie's hometown. It is the capital of a unique cultural and ethnic group who have their own language and who are called the Sorbs. Let's find out a little bit more about them.
The land of the Sorbian ethnic minority is located in Lausitz, also known as Lusatia, between the eastern states of Brandenburg and Saxony. Many older members of the community still wear their traditional costume to religious services. Hymns are sung in the Sorbian language. Tradition is important here. The Sorbs have lived in this area for well over 1,000 years. They still maintain their own culture. The Sorbian tradition of intricate hand-painting of Easter eggs with feathers and wax is demonstrated in the museum. The eggs are an important part of Easter celebrations. Wearing traditional costume is part of Veronika Marling's job.
Witajcie, herzlich willkommen, liebe Gäste, lubi hosho, ja was tu wutrobnie, witam.
In her restaurant, she serves Sorbian specialties. To Marling, cultural tradition goes much deeper than just folklore.
Ich habe das Gefühl, dass ich das weiterreichen muss.
I have the feeling that I have to pass it on. Perhaps that will make young people see that it's important.
Sieht eben, dass das wichtig ist.
Sorbian culture is anchored in the Sorbian language. You can see that in Bautzen. All the signs here are bilingual. Of the 60,000 Sorbs living in the region, only a third actively speak Sorbian. It's hoped that publicly funded radio and television programming will stop the language from dying out. Reports in the Sorbian language address local topics of concern. The station produces and broadcasts Sorbian music. Sorbian journalists report on their own region, keeping their language alive in the process.
People want to be informed in the Sorbian language, to hear music and to have children's entertainment in the language. In other media, you hear only German. Having nothing in their own language would be disastrous for the children. The Sorbian language would only be spoken within families and would die out.
Bautzen also has a German Sorbian theatre. It's holding an open day for Sorbian pupils from the region's primary and high schools in the hope of attracting new members. Sorbs insist their culture is about more than just costumes and painted Easter eggs, and they want to preserve their traditions and language for future generations.
Some wonderful impressions there, yeah? I have to tell you, for me it's always very interesting if I'm travelling with an English-speaking person in your part of the world, the area you come from originally. You'll be driving along a road or whatever, and suddenly the signs will change and there'll be two languages.
Yeah.
And people will say, what's that other language? And you'll say, oh, that's Sorbian. And people will say, what? Yeah, what is Sorbian, yeah? I know a lot more because of that report now, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. What's it like growing up in this bilingual region?
Also wenn man da aufwächst oder aufgewachsen ist,
when a person grows up there or is grown up, then it's pretty normal. It's a bilingual area, and it's not unusual for us that everything is in two languages. It's a Slavic minority. The language sounds a bit like Polish or Czech.
Oder Tschechisch.
Let me just interrupt for a second. I ought to point out for the viewers at home that Bautzen is actually quite close to the Polish border, isn't it?
Richtig,
yeah, it's not very far away.
Genau, es ist gar nicht,
That's right. It's not so far away. So the languages are similar too. It's very hard to describe what constitutes Sorbian culture in this area. It makes them very versatile. For example, we have a theatre, as you've just seen, that's bilingual. Especially at Easter time, Sorbian culture makes the city very interesting and culturally diverse. But it will remain an ongoing challenge, as is always the case with minorities, to keep their culture alive.
Minderheit ist, diese auch noch aufrechtzuerhalten.
And I read Andreas, the drummer in your band.
Richtig.
I don't know how Sorbian. He's a bit Sorbian at least. Is he a lot Sorbian?
Nein, ein kleines bisschen.
No, I'd say a little bit Sorbian. His father is Sorbian, his mother isn't, so he's half Sorbian.
Yeah.
He went to a Sorbian high school in our town. But it had A and B classes. A classes were for people whose mother tongue was Sorbian. B classes were for people who learned Sorbian as a second language. He was a bit lazy, I'd say, and wasn't really interested in learning it better or speaking it. But his father speaks it well. And he works as a photographer at the Sorbian newspaper. As I said, it's somehow completely normal for us.
Und ja, aber wie gesagt, für uns ist das irgendwie total normal.
Talking of things being normal, and talking of people having impressions of Germany from outside Germany, you come from the eastern part of Germany, what used to be East Germany. And I'm very, very curious to know, are you somebody who, for whom that is just not important anymore? Or is there still this, you know, people outside Germany, they see this East-West divide. Yeah. And they want to know, are there really people who have grown up where that is not the central fact in their lives?
Also in unserer Generation, also gerade in
Well, in my generation, and especially around my age, we don't really remember the fall of the Berlin Wall. We were too young. When people ask us, do you consider yourselves an East German band? We reply that we're a band from Germany, and we grew up in a city that just happened to be in the eastern part of Germany. But we could just as easily have been a band from Hamburg or from Munich. We don't see it in such extreme terms. That might be different for bands who really made their music in the former East Germany, because of course they faced limitations, and that probably affected their music and the way they wrote. But that wasn't our situation. So for this reason, I think that every young band of our age stage, regardless of where they grew up, made similar music. We no longer feel any division between East and West Germany. Although, of course, we know from what our parents told us how things were back then, and what the differences were, and what happened, and how our parents lived, and how people in the West lived.
Mm. And you come from a relatively small town. You're a relatively big band. I was saying you're a big band, and you were playing it down a little bit. When you go home to Bautzen, how much hype is there? Are you celebrities? Are you stars?
I think
a few people in Bautzen recognize us when we walk down the street. On the other hand, Bautzen is the city the four of us have known the longest, and which witnessed our development from the beginning, when we were just a very small band of high school students. They saw us back then when we played at small venues in Bautzen, in small villages. They saw everything up close. And that's why we're simply a part of Bautzen. On the other hand, it's also special for the people in Bautzen when they see us walking through the town.
Für die Leute in Bautzen mal was Besonderes, wenn sie uns da durchlaufen sehen.
Stefanie and I were just talking about where we live in Berlin, and we came to the conclusion that I live in a boring district of West Berlin and she lives in a hot district of East Berlin. So the question is now, do you take advantage of clubland?
We love going out and also to clubs, but we mostly go for the music. Not so much to dance, but rather to see concerts. It's quite funny. I live near the former Magnet Club, and Knack Club was around the corner from me. When we moved to Berlin a few years ago, there were really great clubs where bands played on Wednesdays for free. And we took it seriously, and we also had one of our first gigs there. And it's incredibly sad that the space for these clubs is disappearing more and more.
Okay, so there is a problem. There's a real problem there that you and other bands have been affected by, certainly other bands.
Yeah. Yes, the venues, especially for young bands, are disappearing.
Oh yeah, you see, I'm not as boring as it sounds, because I don't go out dancing in clubs, but I do go to an awful lot of music clubs and listen to bands. Let's go back to your studio, because I'm very interested. I mean, a band needs a basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you need to be able to pay the rent for wherever it is you practice, and you need to have a studio. And how does that work for you guys? The studio looked very nice, by the way, I have to say.
Ja, wir hatten vor ganz paar Jahren haben wir noch in einem großen Probenhaus.
Yes, a few years ago we had a house in Marzahn where we could practice.
Marzahn, also relativ.
It was relatively far out in the east part of Berlin. There's a large building where around 200 bands practiced. And the problem was that we could hear the bands next to us, above and below us. And you never had the silence that you need to record demos or songs. So we wanted to have something more workable. And now we've gone again to the east, to Adlershof, and have found a former East German recording studio. Of course, it has the best acoustics, so we moved there. And then we renovated a bit, and now it's our base. We prepare there for our live concerts, and we also write many songs there.
Okay. And you're doing a very good job. You've got your fourth album out now. The last question that I've got time to ask you is, I'll give you 30 seconds to tell me, is there another Stefanie inside you who could be doing something very different, who yearns to do something different?
I think that would be difficult for us. The four of us have just recently discovered this. It's great that we can do what we do best. And if I can do anything, then maybe it's a bit of singing, and everything else might be a bit more difficult. So I'm really happy that I can do the things the way I'm doing them now.
It sounds great, and you make a very, very happy impression. I mean, to go back to your definition of happiness, I can readily imagine that you get up in the morning and think, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Good for you, Stefanie. Right, we're going to wind up with our traditional Talking Germany quiz at the end of the programme, yeah? I'll give you two alternatives. First question, Berlin, or are you a Berliner or a Bautzener?
Ein Bautzner.
I'm a person from Bautzen with half her heart in Berlin.
Okay. Do you prefer to be in the studio or on the stage?
Both. Beides. Ich glaube,
I think we like both. The studio goes along with it, but we prefer to be on stage.
A band or a family?
The band is also family for this reason, both.
Would you prefer to have happiness or success?
Nein, ich glaube,
no, I think it's more important to be happy, because it's only when you're happy that you can do what you're doing in a way that might bring success.
That was the last word from the happy and successful Stefanie Kloß. Great definition of happiness, I like it. Great guest, as I say. If you've enjoyed her company as much as I have, do come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and cheers.